Revenge with Karen.
I'm not signing that. I remember saying it softly. Not angry, not afraid, just done. The document in front of me had a delivery date pushed 2 weeks forward, magically transforming a still-in-development software module into delivered and billed. One line, one date. But that little nudge would mean $500,000 booked early. And not just for bragging rights. This number would be printed in the quarterly investor brief for our Series E raise. Difference between a clean round and an implosion. Nobody in that war room blinked. The director of ops just tapped his pen against the table, rhythm like a death clock. 1-2, 1-2. Lisa, it's not about the actual deployment. It's the intent to deliver, and legal's fine with it. Legal wasn't fine with it. I knew because I was the one who walked it to them 2 days ago, and their associate flagged the exact same issue. Guess who never made it to the recap email? Compliance. Because compliance wasn't a power player anymore. Just a formality. Just me. I'd been at Sylvanta Systems for 6 years, long enough to survive 2 CFOs, a merger, and one very sloppy internal audit that I'd cleaned up while the finance team was too busy dodging blame. I wasn't flashy. I didn't network at mixers or pontificate during town halls, just kept the books clean and made sure our filings didn't land us in front of the SEC. Not sexy, but essential, or so I thought. Back then, our company was buzzing with the kind of overcaffeinated optimism that makes people do stupid things in expensive suits. We were weeks out from the biggest round of our life, Series E, $95 million targeted, with a buyout whisper already circling from a tech conglomerate looking to swallow us whole. Everyone was posturing. Forecast decks polished to high gloss. Pipeline numbers rounded up with a wink. HR rolled out new swag bags, and the CEO started making jokes about yacht names. And in the middle of all that, me, sitting in a narrow office with a flickering overhead light, combing through revenue recognition schedules like they were the Dead Sea Scrolls. That's where I saw it. 3 entries flagged Q2 recognized tied to deliverables not even in UAT yet. I triple-checked Jira. I pinged the PM. She confirmed dev work was behind. There was no way these should be marked as revenue. Not under GOP, not under common sense, not under anything resembling ethics. I flagged it to my direct report, James. He sighed, then leaned back like I'd asked him to solve world hunger. Lisa, I know. This came from Rick's office. He's saying we need to show momentum. Everyone's moving fast right now. Rick Travers, the newly parachuted CFO with perfect teeth, a private equity resume, and a tendency to use the phrase growth optics like it cured cancer. He'd been there 3 months and already scrapped 2 internal review cycles, dismissed our staff accountant for negative energy, and started every meeting by asking why we couldn't move like a startup. Made it clear he wanted results, not red tape. I didn't care about politics. I cared about not going to prison, so I did what I always did, I documented. I noted the misalignment, cross-referenced the contracts, included deployment schedules, and pushed it to the compliance queue. Then I followed up. Then I followed up again. And the response? Silence. The kind of silence that means we heard you and we're ignoring you. A week later, it was pulled from the audit prep team entirely. No explanation. No replacement. Just reallocated bandwidth and an invite to assist with onboarding documentation for a new sales hire who used to bartend at the VP's country club. The message was loud and clear. You're no longer essential. Stay quiet, stay small. That weekend, I couldn't sleep. I found myself rereading our internal controls policy, tracing the lines like they might morph into something more comforting. I didn't even realize how far things had slipped. The mechanisms were still there: compliance queue, audit trail, peer review sign-off, but they were paper skeletons. The culture had shifted. We weren't checking ourselves anymore. We were sanding down the rules to fit a narrative. And in the middle of that, I started asking myself the question that never ends well. What happens if someone outside notices? It wasn't paranoia, it was pattern recognition. The kind that creeps into your gut after too many meetings where you're told, not now, or you're being too technical, or we'll fix it in post. The truth was simple: nobody wanted the truth. They wanted the number. And I was the last person in the room willing to say otherwise, so I did something I hadn't done in 6 years. I saved a copy, not just the doc, everything. The audit trail, the metadata, the unapproved red lines. I tagged it, dated it, tucked it somewhere safe. I didn't know it yet, but I had just set the fuse. It happened on a Tuesday, because of course it did. Tuesdays are when the real wreckage shows up. after everyone's done pretending to have their shit together on Monday. Rick Travers stormed into the finance war room like he was late to a game only he knew the rules to. Aviators still on, cell phone dangling from one hand, barked something about momentum curves, and dumped a deck on the table like it was a dead animal. "We're moving the investor meeting up," he said. "End of the month. No excuses." Someone coughed. A slide flipped to a projection that made 0 sense. Deferred revenue magically flattening just in time to make Q2 look like a rocket ship. The numbers were too clean, the trajectory too optimistic. Someone had run a forecast through a wish engine and printed it without checking the math. Rick pointed at the projection like Moses with a PowerPoint. "This is what confidence looks like. This is how you raise capital." I looked at the graph, then at the line item tied to our pending acquisition, software bundles that hadn't even hit final QA. "That line's still undelivered," I said, flat but clear. Recognizing it this quarter breaks both contract terms and policy. Didn't even look at me. "Who approved this entry?" I asked again, louder. The room went still. Eyes slid sideways. Rick finally turned his head like I was a fly buzzing too close to his Chardonnay. "Lisa," he said, smiling with his mouth and nowhere else, "I need you to stop thinking like a bureaucrat and start thinking like a builder." "I'm thinking like someone who doesn't want to be subpoenaed," I snapped. And that's when it happened. He leaned forward, palms on the table, slow and theatrical, like he was about to bless us with some ancient startup gospel. "That date is an inconvenience," he said. "Find one that isn't." The words hit like a backhand. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't have to. They all knew what he meant. He wasn't asking me to double-check the calendar. He was telling me to lie. I stood there, heart pounding, breath shallow. I could feel heat rising in my cheeks, not from embarrassment, no, this was something worse. The slow, searing realization that the rules no longer applied. Not to him, not to anyone in this room, just to me, and only if I was stupid enough to still follow them. "I'm not changing the date," I said finally. He turned to the HR rep sitting quietly in the corner. "Can we talk process?" he asked with a smile. She nodded. And just like that, it was over. I was walked out in front of everyone. No box, no last coffee, no goodbye. Just a quiet little exit parade past the open floor seating, my badge still clipped to my belt, my compliance folder left unopened on the desk. One guy tried to stand. Rick shot him a glance. He sat back down without a word. I didn't cry. Not on the elevator ride down. Not in the parking garage. Not even when I got home and realized I couldn't access any of my personal files from my work laptop because IT had already disabled my credentials. I just sat on the edge of my bathtub and stared at the grout. 6 years, hundreds of reports, late nights fixing other people's mistakes. All of it gone with one sentence. "That date is an inconvenience." By the next morning, they deleted my name from the team page. Rick sent out a company-wide email thanking me for my contributions to Solvanta's growth and expressing confidence in new leadership alignment. Read like a eulogy written by someone who'd never met me. People messaged, quietly. One said, "We're all scared now." Another, "It's like he erased you." But it was the junior analyst, Kara, who said the part that stuck. "I saved your last memo. Just in case, just in case." I sat with those words for a long time. I opened the backup I'd encrypted to a private drive, scrolled past my summary, past the bullet points, down to the line that made Rick's blood boil. The proposed timeline adjustment reflects recognition of income prior to confirmed delivery, and may therefore be in conflict with both ASC 606 and internal control mandates. Cold, dry, clinical, but enough to trigger a review if the right eyes ever saw it. That night, I poured a glass of wine and drafted a new version. Clearer, sharper, attached exhibits, tagged the relevant contract clauses, added dates, timestamps, language the auditors couldn't ignore. Then I submitted it through the secure channel I'd used only twice in my entire career. And just like that, I was out of the system. But the memo wasn't. I didn't move for 11 hours. The day after they walked me out, I sat in my apartment still wearing the same slacks and blouse, now wrinkled and stale with office air. The blinds were drawn, the lights off. My phone buzzed a few times, friends, probably. Maybe Kara. I didn't check, not yet. The silence was louder than anything they could say. Grief isn't always about death. Sometimes it's about the burial of effort. 6 years of showing up early, catching things others missed, fixing broken spreadsheets at midnight, and remembering what someone else forgot to file. I'd held the seams together while they frayed the edges. And now I was just gone. No handoff. No thank you. just a recycled HR template and a badge drop-off. I let myself feel it for one day. Then I got up, took a long shower, and made a cup of coffee so strong it tasted like revenge. I sat down at my personal laptop, logged into my private archive, and opened the file folder labeled 612 Q2 Hold Adjusted Revenue. Inside were versions, dozens of them. Not just the reports, but the Slack threads, timestamp screenshots, internal memos, and calendar invites. Every breadcrumb. I didn't keep these out of spite. I kept them because that was my job. Accuracy, integrity, compliance. And they fired me for it, so I wrote, not a manifesto, not a complaint, just a memo. The kind external auditors see every day, dry, careful, clear. I used the old format from our partner reviews. Titled it plainly, Review Note Q2 Revenue Timing Inconsistencies. The body was 5 pages long, each point methodically laid out. Projected vs. actual delivery timelines for the 3 flagged contracts. Direct excerpts from the original scopes of work and payment schedules. The newly adjusted recognized dates. A concluding note, the deviation may represent a misclassification of deferred revenue, and if paired with acquisition disclosures, could constitute a material misstatement under FASB guidelines. I didn't speculate. I didn't accuse. I didn't say Rick's name. I let the numbers speak. I included a digital fingerprint, metadata hash of the original files. Then I attached redacted screenshots of the internal approval queue, including the step where my access was removed. Before hitting send, I added one final step. I blind carbon copied the memo to a private legal inbox, an address my old law professor once told me to set up just in case you ever need to prove what was said. And when. It was time-stamped, auto-forwarded, and stored on a separate server. Then I sent the main version to the audit team at Breyer and Munz, the same team that had audited us for the last 2 years. I used the contact I trusted, Nancy Lee, the senior partner. She once called me the only person in that building who knows where the skeletons are and which ones are still breathing. I didn't know if she'd even see it. Their firewall might flag it. The partner rotation might have shifted. Maybe she'd left, or maybe Rick's charm had already infected that circle too. I closed the laptop, and I waited. 2 days passed. Nothing, not a ping, not a bounce back. No lawsuit threats, no thank you notes, just silence. But silence, I'd learned, wasn't the same as inaction. On day 3, I logged into LinkedIn, pure reflex. My messages were quiet, but something caught my eye in the news feed. Breyer and Munz delays earnings validation for select private clients, pending internal review. No names, no blame, just a generic corporate delay. But I knew what that meant. I knew their rhythm. That line didn't come out of nowhere. Still, I told no one. Not Kara, not James. Not even my sister, who kept asking if I was okay and suggesting I just freelance for a while. I deleted the original draft from my desktop, backed up a copy on an encrypted USB, and stashed it in my fireproof lockbox next to my passport and the old lease agreement I'd never thrown out, just in case. And then I went back to my quiet life, drinking bitter coffee, checking job boards, doing contract compliance work for mid-sized firms who didn't have the budget to screw up. No dramatic return, no courtroom drama, just one memo. Sent once, back twice. I wasn't in the system anymore, but the memo was, and it had started to move. I didn't expect to feel anything when the first whisper hit my inbox. It was just a 2-sentence note from a former colleague, buried in a forwarded industry update. Solvanta's Series E timeline pushed. Hearing rumors about auditor holdbacks. No exclamation marks, no emojis. Just plain text, almost bored. But I reread it 6 times. Each pass felt like a breath held too long. I was sitting in the back corner of a co-working space in Columbus, hammering out a compliance checklist for a logistics startup that couldn't find its left shoe without tripping over its right invoice. The pay was crap. The coffee tasted like melted tires. But it gave me a desk, a VPN, and a reason to wake up at 7 a.m. And most importantly, it gave me distance. Still, I couldn't help it. Logged out of the client's portal, opened my encrypted folder, and checked the timestamp on the memo I'd sent 3 weeks ago. The metadata was intact. The attachments hadn't been touched since. But I noticed something else. Someone from Breyer and Munz had viewed my LinkedIn profile. Private mode, of course. But I knew their IP footprint from the years of security reviews. No one else in Cleveland used that subnet mask. Not unless you were inside the firm. That night, I added 3 new exhibits to the archive. A screenshot of the audit hold announcement. A PDF of a now-edited investor deck that omitted the Q2 acceleration slide entirely, and a forwarded internal email, courtesy of Kara, stating that certain revenue recognitions are being revisited for timeline consistency. She didn't say more than that. She didn't have to. Her subject line said enough. Bet you're not surprised. No, I wasn't. But I wasn't ready to celebrate either. I'd seen companies bluff their way through worse. With enough lawyers and liquidity, truth could be a rounding error. Then came the second whisper. James, my old report, the one who had leaned back and sighed when I flagged the fraud, sent me a one-liner from his personal Gmail. Rick is unwell. I blinked, reread, waited. Then he followed up, boards circling. CEO's furious. External review team just showed up for a site walk. That never happens unless they smell blood. I added that to the folder too, created a subfile called post memo activity and tagged it with a new hash key. I knew it was overkill, but old habits don't die, especially not the ones that keep you clean when the fire starts. Meanwhile, the consulting gigs kept trickling in. Nothing fancy. A biotech compliance audit, a retail acquisition checklist, 6-hour crash course for a panicked founder who thought SOX was just a brand of footwear. But every time I opened a new spreadsheet, part of me was listening, ears perked like a dog left alone in a storm, waiting for thunder to roll in from somewhere familiar. Then came the call. Blocked number. I almost didn't answer. Lisa, it was Kara. She sounded different, not scared, not excited, just breathless. I can't talk long, she said, but I thought you should know. Memo made it to the room. I didn't speak. She continued like the room. The big one. External auditor started the meeting by reading from it, word for word, the first paragraph. Rick looked like someone lit a match under his chair. My mouth went dry, and the part about the override internal controls. Yeah, that landed hard. Real hard. I exhaled, finally. She lowered her voice. They tried to blame it on someone else, but no one's buying it, not this time. It's too clear. I didn't ask for details. I didn't have to. I knew the rhythm. When an auditor starts a meeting with an outside memo, it means they've already crossed the line from trust to verification. After the call, I stared out the window at a parking lot full of cracked asphalt and melting snow. I should have felt triumphant. I should have felt safe. But what I really felt was alive. There's a certain hum that starts in your chest when you realize the truth is moving on its own now, like a train you set on the tracks weeks ago, finally rumbling toward the station. I wasn't in the room, but my words were, and the fuse was burning faster now. The message came through at 9:47 a.m. sharp, wrapped in a layer of professional paranoia. No names, no punctuation, no emojis, just 6 words. They read the first sentence. Gray was from Kara, and it landed like a gunshot in my gut. I was in the middle of reviewing a supply chain audit for a food packaging firm that couldn't tell its net 30 from a coffee-stained napkin. The spreadsheet blurred. My hand hovered over the keyboard. I didn't breathe, just stared at the text like it might start bleeding. I didn't need context. I knew exactly what sentence she meant. Recognition of revenue prior to contractual delivery may constitute a material misstatement under ASC 606. Dry as dust. Clinical, safe. But to anyone in the room who understood what those words meant, it was a bomb in khakis. I checked the timestamp again. 9:47. That put it right in the middle of Solvanta's investor prep session, the big one. Remembered the date because they'd announced it publicly last week in a thinly veiled PR blast meant to calm nerves about timeline realignment and auditor collaboration. The kind of empty phrases people use when they're hoping no one notices the smoke. But someone had noticed, and they hadn't just noticed, they'd started the meeting with it. I could see it in my mind. The glossy pitch deck opened, the agenda laid out, and then Nancy Lee, God bless her clinical cruelty, flipping straight past the projections to page 6, clearing her throat and saying, "Before we begin, let's start with the disclosures." Rick, probably sipping alkaline water through bleached teeth, offering his usual grin. We'll get to those. First, let's talk trajectory, Nancy, not smiling, no. We start with this. And then reading it aloud. I don't know if she read the whole memo, but the first line alone was enough. It was the kind of sentence that demands answers and leaves executives blinking like deer on a freeway. It didn't accuse anyone. It didn't dramatize. That was the danger of it. It was precise. And precision is a threat to people who build castles out of hot air and bold fonts. Back in my co-working corner, my heart pounded so loud I thought someone might hear it across the desk divider. I typed one word back, confirmed. Kara replied instantly. Rick tried to pivot. Nancy cut him off. One of the investors asked what ASC 606 actually meant. That's when it got ugly. Ask 606. A harmless little acronym, unless you're trying to pass off unicorn numbers in a funding round. Then it's a blade across the throat. Kara followed up. He said something about industry standard flexibility. I laughed out loud, drew a glance from a guy wearing a t-shirt that said UX Sex. I waved him off, uttered something about a bad punchline, and turned back to my screen. Industry standard flexibility. Jesus. That's like trying to rob a bank and telling the cops, hey, we meant to return the money. Eventually, I minimized Slack and opened my archive again, not out of fear, out of ritual. The memo was still there, locked and clean, backed by everything it needed to survive scrutiny. Metadata. Contract references. Language lifted straight from our own accounting policy, Section 4.1.2, which Rick had once called just legal wallpaper. Wallpaper's funny. Tear it off the wrong way, and you find mold underneath. I leaned back in my chair and let the silence settle. There was no announcement, no headline, no formal notice. But the powder keg had been lit, and I could already feel the tremors coming through the floor. 'Cause here's what happens next in a room like that. One investor goes quiet. Another starts checking his email. Someone opens their laptop, not for notes, but to look up parallel investment options. The mood doesn't just shift, it rots. The glossy deck gets abandoned. The questions start going backwards. Not how fast can you scale, but who signed off on this? And how long have you known? And Rick? Rick starts sweating through his tailored collar, realizing that the only thing more dangerous than being caught in a lie is being caught ignoring someone who told the truth. He had made a choice a month ago to humiliate me publicly, fire me loudly, and delete my access like that would delete my knowledge. But knowledge doesn't disappear. It waits. It travels. And sometimes it walks into a meeting dressed like an auditor and starts reading from a page that can't be argued with. I didn't respond to Kara again. I didn't need to. We were both watching the same slow-motion collapse, just from different buildings. I got up, poured myself another coffee, and smiled, not because I'd won, but because I didn't have to be there to watch them lose. The headlines didn't name me. They never do. That's not how this game is played. But I knew the shape of my shadow when I saw it. Solvanta delays Series E round amid due diligence concerns. Lead investor withdraws support pending audit clarity sources cite accounting inconsistencies tied to pending acquisition. Each article was vague enough to keep the lawyers calm, but pointed enough to set boardrooms buzzing. The phrase material misstatement had begun making its rounds like a contagion. No one said fraud. Not yet. When funding freezes mid-round, and a buyer publicly states it is reevaluating strategic alignment due to procedural irregularities, you don't need a whiteboard to see the iceberg. I watched it unfold from my apartment, still cluttered with half-read audit reports and old ceramic mugs that I kept forgetting to rinse. It was like watching a car crash from behind soundproof glass, quiet, slow, and inevitable. The whispers reached me faster than I expected. Contact from an old compliance seminar messaged me, asking if I was open to new opportunities. That was code. Code for "we heard your name. We're trying not to say it out loud, but we know what you did, and we're impressed." I played dumb. Just finishing up a few projects, I wrote, but open to hearing more. An hour later, my phone rang, blocked number again. This time, it wasn't Kara. "Lisa, it's Mark Lyles from Arvind Capital." I blinked. Arvind wasn't just a name. They were the ones who nearly inked the acquisition deal with Solvanta. The ones who'd paused engagement a week ago after emerging diligence complications. "I'm calling unofficially," he said. "Wanted to ask if you'd be open to consulting. On a different opportunity." My throat went dry. "You mean Solvanta?" He laughed softly. "No, we've already marked that to 0 internally. I'm talking about their competitor, Easton Data, looking at a strategic partnership. They want someone to help build out compliance from the ground up. Someone with precision." He didn't say integrity. That word's too heavy in this world. Precision is safer. "Clean. We're offering project terms at triple your last comp," he added. "Full autonomy. Clean slate." I didn't say yes. I didn't have to. He knew. They always know. Back at Solvanta, I could picture the panic spreading like bleach fumes. Rick shouting at Kara, aiming junior staff, saying nobody flagged it, as if my memo hadn't landed like a siren at their front door. The CEO probably pacing. The board scrambling to schedule an emergency session. They'd be hunting for a scapegoat who no longer existed in their directory. I imagined Rick rifling through his inbox, trying to find an email trail that didn't exist because I'd sent it from outside, through a secure channel, copied to a legal vault he'd never access. Imagined him turning to James or Kara, demanding, "Did you know about this?" And their faces tightening, eyes sliding away. Because the thing about truth is, it doesn't go away when you fire it, it just waits. Meanwhile, my inbox kept pinging. A boutique PE firm in New York, a VC partner in Austin, an offer to keynote a closed-door risk summit in Chicago under Chatham House rules. All expense paid. Then a message from a woman named Priya I hadn't spoken to in 4 years. We met once at a finance law roundtable. She'd gone on to lead compliance strategy for a multinational firm I couldn't afford to mention in my cover letters back when I was job hunting. Her message was short. Heard what happened. Quiet work, clean hands. That's rare. Let's talk. No one had said thank you, not directly. But this was better. I was no longer the woman who got fired for telling the truth. I was the woman who told the truth and watched the liars start to drown in it. At Solvanta, the crisis communications team was likely drafting their third version of a press statement, the kind that says everything and nothing at once. We remain committed to transparency, they'd write. We are evaluating internal processes to ensure future alignment. Meanwhile, the realignment was already underway. It wasn't part of their future. I was already building someone else's. The contract arrived on a Thursday. No negotiation, no back and forth. Just a PDF from Easton Data's general counsel with the subject line, Consulting Agreement Priority Processing. My name, 6-figure retainer, 2-month timeline, and one phrase that made me smile without meaning to: full strategic autonomy at your discretion. I read it 3 times. Not because I didn't believe it, because I did, and then I signed. My first official act as Easton's compliance consultant was to request their audit trail on all deferred revenue accounts linked to pending acquisitions. They sent it in under 3 hours, and unlike Solvanta, nothing smelled like bleach and desperation. I worked remote, quietly. My name wasn't announced in any press release, nor would it be. I was listed in internal documents as External Resource Process Advisor. No LinkedIn posts, no profile updates, but people noticed anyway. The whispers started almost immediately. A screenshot from someone inside Solvanta landed in my Signal inbox, a Slack thread between 2 finance analysts. One message read, "Wait, is Lisa working with them now?" The reply, "Shut up. Rick doesn't know yet." 2 days later, another one. Kara again, he found out. No punctuation. That's how I knew it was bad. Apparently someone at Solvanta's investor roundtable recognized my phrasing in a due diligence checklist Easton submitted. One of those tiny linguistic fingerprints no one notices until it's used against them in a competitive audit. Rick reportedly went silent for a full minute. Then he ordered a full re-review of their Q2 numbers, requested emergency revisions on 2 previous filings, put the entire FP and a team on a 72-hour burn cycle to scrub the timelines. He called it reframing the sequence. Translation, we're in deep shit and trying to repaint the whole. Meanwhile, I was sipping iced coffee in my apartment, outlining a new compliance framework for Easton that wouldn't need to be retroactively justified. I kept the language simple, honest, bulletproof. Not because it made me look good, because I'd learned what happens when you don't. My second deliverable for Easton, a pre-acquisition audit posture review. I flagged 3 clauses that would have become time bombs in 6 months, buried deep in vendor exclusivity agreements. Their COO responded with, "Noted, thank you. How the hell did you find that?" I didn't reply. I didn't need to. The best part? Solvanta's own board was reportedly asking the same question. Not out loud, not on the record. Kara told me. They're all asking, why didn't we listen to her? And then the final breadcrumb came through. An offhand mention in a closed industry compliance bulletin. Breyer and Munz has submitted materials related to Solvanta Systems Q2 reporting as part of ongoing review proceedings. My memo, the one they buried, ignored, erased from the internal trail, was now part of regulatory documentation. Filed, tagged, real. Rick couldn't outrun that. No pivot deck. No industry flexibility speech. Not when your quarter's foundation is built on a date you told someone to change, then fired them when they wouldn't. And now that person is advising the company you're trying to outrun. I stayed off the radar. No interviews, no leaks, no revenge tour. I didn't need to be the face of the fallout. I was the pulse under it. One morning, I opened my inbox to find a message from a Solvanta investor I'd never spoken to directly. Just one sentence. You're the reason we're not doubling down. That's all. I added it to my private archive, tagged it Echoes, because sometimes justice doesn't knock on your door. It echoes through the hallways you used to walk, bounces off the walls of boardrooms you were forced to leave, and lands in the laps of the people who once told you to shut up and smile. And it keeps going, whether you're in the room or not. I wasn't in the room, but I was everywhere else. It started with a throat clear, not a dramatic one, just the subtle, clipped sort that makes every head in a boardroom turn at once. The kind that says, enough slides, enough forecasts, now we deal with the truth. Rick Travers had just finished pacing in front of a 12-foot screen filled with animated bar graphs and 3 buzzwords no one in the room believed anymore. Scalable, synergistic, Q4 rebound. He'd gone all in on speed, confidence, and carefully vague answers. Then Nancy Lee, still in her gray blazer, still utterly unbothered, tapped the stack of printed disclosures in front of her. And read my memo again. Not the first sentence this time. She went straight to the middle, section 3, bullet 5. The override of standard internal control procedures by senior finance leadership, documented through the cancellation of review steps and suppression of Q-based compliance sign-offs, may reflect a systemic issue in governance and reporting integrity. Silence. Rick's lips twitched. His eyes flitted toward the CEO, who sat rigid at the head of the table, like he'd just heard a bank alarm and didn't know which exit to use. Someone at the far end, senior investor with salt and pepper hair and a face carved by 30 years of reading people just like Rick, let out a slow exhale. Then, without a word, he closed his laptop. The noise was louder than any accusation. Final, he stood up, didn't push in his chair, didn't thank anyone, just walked out of the room with the kind of calm that only comes from total disgust. A second later, another investor followed. Then another. Within 90 seconds, 5 of the 12 external stakeholders were gone. Rick, still gripping the slide remote like it might turn back time, stammered something about contextual clarification and legacy friction in workflow. Nobody responded. Nancy didn't even blink. The deck was still on slide 4. They never made it past it. Word spread fast. One of the marketing leads texted Kara from the lobby. They're leaving. Meeting still live but dead inside. From where I sat, 2 time zones away, quiet hotel suite outside Denver, finalizing Easton's acquisition policy playbook, I watched the chain reaction in real time. News alerts, Slack leaks, analyst tweets. One post simply read, Solvanta collapse confirms fears. Memo was real. The memo, not a memo. Mine, the one Rick called non-collaborative. The one that got me fired for inflexibility. The one he tried to bury under jargon and confidence theater. Now it was printed, cited, read aloud. Document so dry and technical that it didn't scream, just stabbed over and over with footnotes and bullet points that couldn't be argued. A journalist reached out for comment. I didn't reply. Kara messaged, he looked like he was melting. You should have seen the sweat. I wrote back, I don't need to. I pictured Rick's panic. The way he'd spin, looking for someone to throw under a bus that had already run him over. Blaming juniors, legal, audit cycles, weather, anything but the one thing he couldn't undo. The truth written in plain language, delivered on time, and stored forever. The board would be in triage mode now. The Series E round was functionally dead. No investor in their right mind was signing checks with that memo floating through email threads and regulatory inboxes like a virus coded in Excel. And the acquisition? Dead before it could walk. No buyer wants to inherit a governance scandal mid-funding round, especially not when the documentation includes terms like intentional suppression and material misclassification. They'd rebrand it in the press. Strategic pause, market reevaluation, leadership recalibration. But internally, it was over. They knew it. Everyone did. I didn't gloat. That's the beauty of silence. It does the gloating for you. I closed my laptop and looked out the window at the snow coming down over the city. Clean, quiet, methodical. No fireworks, just cold, inevitable accumulation. It wasn't personal anymore. It was procedural. Rick's resignation hit the wires late Friday night, buried under the usual PR camouflage. Leadership transition to support next phase growth. A masterclass in corporate euphemism, 24 words that meant only one thing. He'd been thrown off the sled to save the dogs. Internally, it was less graceful. Kara told me he didn't even make it to his car before shredders were wheeled into his office. His name was stripped from the directory by Monday. The team's Slack channel went silent for 2 days, as if everyone was afraid speaking would trigger another collapse. The CEO followed with his own statement. We are initiating a strategic realignment of executive leadership to reinforce our commitment to transparency and investor trust. Translation: we bet on the wrong horse, and the horse lit the track on fire. The acquisition deal was officially terminated the next morning. Arvind Capital's partner firm issued a one-sentence press release. We have chosen to pursue other opportunities better aligned with our risk profile. The most polite way a billion-dollar fund can say, get your house in order and don't call us again. That same afternoon, got an email from a Solvanta board liaison I hadn't spoken to since the 2019 audit cycle. Subject: request for conversation, oversight role discussion. The message was short, apologetic, polished. It referenced my deep understanding of governance standards, acknowledged the circumstances surrounding your departure, and proposed exploratory discussions regarding a potential return to Solvanta in a senior oversight capacity. There was a line in there that almost got me. We know now that your actions likely prevented a far more damaging outcome. Likely, cute. I read the message twice, sat with it, let it sit in my inbox for 3 days without answering. Not because I needed time to think, because I wanted them to sweat. On the 4th day, I replied, I appreciate the message and the acknowledgement. At this time, I'm fully committed to a long-term advisory contract with Easton Data, not seeking new roles. Best of luck with your transition. No warmth, no venom, just clean, sharp dismissal. They didn't reply, and they didn't need to, because everyone in that building, everyone who had sat silently while I was walked out, now knew exactly what had happened. Not just that I was right, but that I'd been methodical, measured, and that my refusal to fudge one date had unspooled their entire illusion of competence. Easton extended my contract before I even asked, doubled the rate, gave me full veto power on compliance architecture, and let me build the team from scratch. My hours were mine to control. My inbox stayed quiet, and when I spoke in meetings, people took notes. One morning, while reviewing a vendor risk matrix, I opened LinkedIn out of habit. Saw the usual nonsense, excited to share, humbled to announce, blessed to be joining. Then I clicked into my own profile. The banner image still showed a stock photo of a compliance checklist I'd uploaded years ago. Dusty, forgettable. I replaced it with one phrase. Centered, bold, no italics, no hashtags, facts aren't flexible, that's the point. I hit save and sat back. Because that was the truth, always had been. The numbers don't lie. The timeline doesn't bend. And when you build your empire on air, it only takes one fact, just one, to bring the whole thing down. I never raised my voice, never broke the law, never leaked to the press. I just refused to change a date. And in the end, that was enough. Thanks for joining the fun, you office survivors. Subscribe for more switch-flicking drama. Let's make your former coworkers sweat.